The dog didn't move when the wind howled. Snow came down in slow, relentless sheets, soft enough to look innocent, heavy enough to bury the past. At the edge of Black Hollow Cemetery, beneath a crooked pine tree that had survived more winters than anyone in town, a German shepherd sat frozen in place, ears high, eyes fixed on a single headstone. When Daniel Mercer stepped closer, he meant only to chase the animal off before nightfall. Then he saw the name carved into the granite. And the cold that reached his bones had nothing to do with the weather. If you find yourself drawn to stories where grief has teeth and memory refuses to stay buried, stay with this one. The truth here does not arrive all at once. It circles, it waits, it tests who deserves it. The road into Black Hollow was barely visible under the snow. Daniel Mercer gripped the steering wheel tighter as his pickup crawled over the narrow stretch of asphalt. The headlights cut a pale tunnel through the white, illuminating skeletal trees that clawed at the sky. He hadn't driven this road in 8 years. 8 years of avoiding it. 8 years of pretending the town had swallowed him whole and not the other way around. The sign at the edge of town leaned at a tired angle, population 612. Someone had scratched out the last digit once. It had never been fixed. He told himself he was only here to settle paperwork. Sell the house. Sign the transfer documents for his late father's estate. 2 days, maybe 3. Then he'd return to Denver and to the quiet apartment where no one knew his history. But he'd forgotten how silence worked here. In Black Hollow, silence wasn't empty. It listened. The cemetery sat beyond town limits, where the forest pressed in close and the land sloped toward frozen marsh. Daniel hadn't meant to drive there. His hands had turned the wheel on their own. He blamed muscle memory. The gates groaned as he pushed them open. Snow muffled his boots as he stepped inside. The air tasted metallic, like it did before a storm. That was when he saw the dog. A German shepherd, large, muscular, coat thick and dusted white. It sat perfectly still in front of a headstone near the far edge, away from the clustered family plots and closer to the tree-line. Daniel frowned. "Hey!" he called out, his voice carrying thinly through the cold. "Go on." The dog didn't react. No flinch. No ear twitch. It simply watched the grave as if guarding it. He moved closer, irritation rising. Strays didn't last long in winters like this. Someone in town must have lost it. Or abandoned it. "Come on," he muttered, stepping around the stone. And then he saw the name. Leah Mercer. Beloved daughter. 1995 to 2018. Daniel's breath left him in a sharp cloud. The world narrowed. Snow fell harder, ticking softly against granite. Leah. His sister. His little sister. His knees almost gave out beneath him. "That's not possible," he whispered. Leah wasn't buried here. She couldn't be. There had been no funeral. No body. 8 years ago, she had vanished. And Daniel had been the last person to see her alive. The official story was simple. Leah had left town after a fight. She'd taken her car. She'd been seen heading west on Route 16. A storm had rolled in that night. Her car was later found abandoned near Miller's Bend Bridge. No signs of foul play. No signs of her either. After a year, the search was called off. After 2, she was declared legally dead. Daniel had left soon after. But there had never been a grave. He would have known. He would have remembered. His father would have told him. Wouldn't he? The dog finally shifted. Its eyes lifted to Daniel's face. They weren't wild. They weren't confused. They were assessing. As if measuring him. "You don't belong here," Daniel murmured, though he wasn't sure if he meant the dog or himself. He crouched slowly, brushing snow away from the lower half of the stone. There it was. A smaller inscription beneath the dates. She told the truth. Daniel's stomach twisted. "What truth?" he breathed. Behind him, a branch snapped. He turned sharply. Nothing but trees and drifting snow. When he looked back, the dog had stood up. It stepped closer to him, not aggressive, but deliberate. Its body angled between him and the tree-line. Protective. Of the grave. Or of him. "You're hers," Daniel said softly. Leah had loved animals. Strays followed her home like iron to a magnet. She'd once smuggled a three-legged cat into his bedroom, begging him not to tell their father. He swallowed hard. "If you belong to her, where have you been?" The dog held his gaze. And for one irrational second, Daniel felt as if the animal knew exactly who he was. A gust of wind cut through the cemetery. The pine tree overhead groaned. Daniel stood slowly. He scanned the surrounding graves. Most were old weathered stones from the 1800s, names half erased by time. But Leah's marker was new. The granite smooth, the carving sharp, fresh. He stepped back, heart pounding. "Who put you here?" he asked the empty air. "Most folks don't visit this time of year." The voice came from behind him. Daniel spun. Sheriff Tom Calloway stood near the gate, hands tucked inside his heavy coat. Snow gathered on the brim of his hat. He looked older than Daniel remembered, more lined, more worn. But his eyes were the same. Observant. Careful. "Daniel," Tom said evenly. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." Daniel straightened. "I could say the same." Tom's gaze flicked to the grave. To the dog. "You found it," he said. "Found what?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "My sister's headstone." "Yeah. I found it." Tom exhaled slowly. "Your father had it placed last spring." Daniel stared at him. "My father would have told me." Tom didn't answer immediately. Snow settled between them. "He thought it would give him peace," the sheriff said at last. "After everything." "After what everything?" Daniel demanded. Tom's eyes hardened slightly. "You weren't here, Daniel." The accusation landed heavier than the snow. Daniel stepped forward. "There was no body." "No," Tom agreed quietly. "There wasn't." "Then what exactly are we burying?" Silence. The dog shifted again, pressing lightly against Daniel's leg. Tom's gaze lowered to it. "Strange thing," the sheriff said. "That dog showed up the same week your father ordered the stone." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Tom replied carefully, "that some things don't stay buried just because we decide they should." The wind rose, sharp and biting. Daniel looked down at Leah's name again. She told the truth. The words felt like a blade sliding under his ribs. "What truth?" he asked. Tom's jaw tightened. "That's something you'd know better than me." Daniel felt the ground tilt. "You think I had something to do with her disappearing?" Tom didn't blink. "I think," he said slowly, "you were the last one to argue with her. Loud enough for half the town to hear. That was 8 years ago. And you left the next morning." Daniel's throat closed. He had left. He had needed to. Black Hollow had been suffocating him. The rumors. The whispers. The way people looked at him after Leah vanished. But he hadn't hurt her. He knew he hadn't. Didn't he? The dog suddenly growled. "Low." Focused. Both men turned toward the trees. A figure stood just beyond the tree line, partially obscured by snow. Watching. Daniel squinted. "Who's that?" Tom's expression darkened. "Stay here." The sheriff stepped forward, boots crunching through snow. "Hey," he called out. "This is private property." The figure didn't move. Daniel's heart hammered. The dog barked once, sharp, warning. And then the figure turned and disappeared into the woods. Tom stopped at the edge of the cemetery, scanning the forest. After a long moment, he returned. "Probably just a hunter," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. Daniel looked at the dog. It wasn't watching the woods anymore. It was watching him. As if waiting. For what, he didn't know. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The house felt smaller than he remembered. The wallpaper yellowed. The floorboards creaked in familiar places. His father's recliner sat empty in the corner, a dent still visible in the cushion. Daniel poured himself a glass of bourbon and stood by the window. Snow continued to fall. And there, across the street, under the broken street lamp, the German shepherd sat, watching the house. Daniel's pulse spiked. He stepped outside, cold biting his face. "Hey!" he called softly. The dog stood, tail low but not tucked. It approached slowly. Up close, Daniel could see a worn leather collar beneath the thick fur. No tag, but engraved faintly on the inside strap. LM. Daniel's hands trembled. "Leah Mercer," he whispered. The dog leaned into him, and for the first time in 8 years, Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest. Behind him, the front door creaked. He turned sharply. It was closed. He was sure he'd shut it. The wind howled down the street, and from somewhere in the dark, he had the unmistakable feeling. He wasn't the only one who knew he was back. Daniel didn't remember falling asleep. He only remembered the sound. A slow, deliberate knock. Not at the front door. From inside the house. He opened his eyes to darkness thick as ink. The digital clock beside the bed read 2:17 a.m. The power had flickered earlier, half the town probably running on backup generators, but the house was quiet now. Too quiet. Then it came again. 3 soft knocks. Below him. From the living room. Daniel sat up, heart pounding against his ribs. Old houses settled in the cold. Pipes contracted. Wood shifted. That's what he told himself. But those sounds had rhythm. He slid out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat leaning against the dresser. He hadn't consciously placed it there. Muscle memory again. Protection. The hallway stretched long and dim. Moonlight leaked through the stairwell window, painting the walls in pale blue. He moved slowly down the stairs. The dog was at the bottom. Sitting. Facing the living room. Ears forward. Daniel froze. "You're supposed to be outside," he whispered. The dog didn't look at him. It stared at the far wall. The wall where his father used to keep the old hunting rifles. The wall that now held nothing but faded outlines where frames once hung. Another knock. This time clearer. From behind the wall. Daniel's mouth went dry. There was no door there. Just plaster. The dog stood and walked toward it, nose low to the ground. It pawed once at the baseboard. Daniel's pulse thundered. "Stop," he murmured, though he stepped closer. The house had been renovated once when Daniel was a teenager. His father had sealed off part of the basement after water damage. Daniel remembered the arguments. Leah insisting something wasn't right. Their father snapping at her to drop it. She told the truth. The words on the headstone burned in his mind. The dog scratched again, more insistently. Daniel crouched and pressed his palm against the wall. Cold. Colder than the rest of the house. He tapped lightly with the bat. Hollow. His breath hitched. Behind him, the front door handle rattled. Daniel spun. Silence. Then, a heavy thud against the door. The dog barked sharply. Daniel moved fast, crossing the room in 3 strides and yanking the door open. Snow whipped inside. No one stood there. But fresh footprints marked the porch. Large boots. Leading away. By morning, the storm had slowed to a lazy drift. Daniel stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window. The dog lay near the back door, alert even in stillness. Someone had been here. Not just watching. Testing. His phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Yeah. Static. Then breathing. Slow. Measured. Daniel. The voice was low, distorted slightly, but familiar enough to tighten his spine. Who is this? A pause. She shouldn't have trusted you. The line went dead. Daniel stared at the screen. Rage flared hot and fast. He dialed Sheriff Calloway immediately. Tom answered on the second ring. You up early? Someone was on my porch last night. Silence. You see them? No. But they left tracks. And I got a call. What kind of call? Daniel hesitated. She shouldn't have trusted you. Tom's exhale crackled through the speaker. Stay put, he said. I'll be there in 10. Sheriff Calloway arrived in a snow-dusted cruiser, his jaw tight. He studied the porch carefully, crouching to inspect the footprints. Size 11. Maybe 12, he muttered. Hard to tell with the snow. Daniel crossed his arms. You think this is random? Tom didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted to the dog. "That thing's been following you?" he asked. "It was at Leah's grave. It was here when I woke up." Tom stepped closer to the animal. It didn't growl. It didn't retreat. It simply watched him. "Leah didn't own a shepherd," Tom said. "She volunteered at the rescue outside town." Tom's brow furrowed. "That place shut down years ago." "Yeah," Daniel replied. "Right after she disappeared." Silence stretched. "Daniel," Tom said carefully, "why did you and your sister fight that night?" Daniel felt the old memory rise like bile. "She wanted to leave." "That's not what I meant." Daniel's jaw clenched. "She was convinced Dad was hiding something." Tom held his gaze. And I told her she was paranoid." The word tasted bitter. "She said she'd found proof. Said she'd go to you." Tom's eyes darkened. "She never came to me." Daniel swallowed. "She left before she could." Or so he'd believed. Later that afternoon, Daniel drove to the edge of town. The old animal rescue sat abandoned behind a sagging chain-link fence. The sign out front had fallen, half buried in snow. The dog perked up as they approached. "You remember this place?" Daniel asked quietly. The animal moved toward the gate. The chain was rusted but loose. Daniel pushed it open. The building smelled of mildew and old straw. Cages lined the walls, empty and corroded. In the back office, a desk still stood. Daniel brushed snow from the surface. A filing cabinet drawer hung slightly open. He pulled it fully. Inside were folders, warped by moisture. He flipped through them until he found one labeled LM. His breath stalled. He opened it. Not adoption forms. Not volunteer hours. Photographs. Grainy. Taken at night. Daniel leaned closer. The images showed the back of his father's property. The barn. And beneath it, a door. He didn't remember a door under the barn. The final photo was closer. A padlock. Newer than the surrounding wood. On the back of the photograph, written in Leah's handwriting. "He thinks I don't know. But I do." Daniel's vision blurred. The dog let out a low whine. Behind him, the floor creaked. He spun. Tom Calloway stood in the doorway, gun drawn. "Put the folder down," the sheriff said quietly. Daniel stared at him. "What is this?" Tom's expression was unreadable. "You weren't supposed to find that." The words fell like stones. "You knew," Daniel breathed. Tom stepped inside, boots crunching softly over debris. "Your father was a complicated man." "Don't." Daniel's voice shook. "Don't you dare justify anything." Tom's jaw tightened. "You think I didn't investigate?" "I did. I searched that barn myself. And I found nothing." Daniel held up the photograph. "She did." Tom's eyes flickered. For the first time, Daniel saw something crack in the sheriff's composure. Not guilt. Fear. "You should leave town," Tom said. Daniel let out a hollow laugh. "That's your solution?" "Some truths," Tom replied quietly, "destroy more than they fix." The dog stepped in front of Daniel. Low growl vibrating in its chest. Tom's gun lowered slightly. "You don't understand what you're walking into," the sheriff said. "Then explain it." A beat. Tom didn't. Instead, he backed toward the door. "If you go to that barn," he said, "don't expect me to protect you." Then he was gone. Evening fell heavy over Black Hollow. Daniel stood outside the barn on his father's old property. Snow coated the roof. The structure loomed dark against the fading sky. The dog stood beside him. "You knew," Daniel murmured. "Didn't you?" The animal stared at the ground near the foundation. Daniel stepped closer. There, half buried beneath snow and hay, was the outline of a trapdoor. His pulse roared in his ears. He brushed snow away. The padlock from the photograph hung there, rust creeping along its edges. But not enough to suggest 8 years. More like 1. Someone had been here recently. Daniel's hands trembled as he reached for it. Behind him, tires crunched on gravel. He turned sharply. Headlights cut through the dark. A truck he didn't recognize. The engine shut off. A man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, face partially shadowed. Daniel's breath caught. He knew that silhouette. "Ethan," he whispered. "Ethan Hale. Leah's ex-boyfriend. The man she'd broken up with weeks before disappearing. The man who'd sworn she was lying about something." Ethan approached slowly. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. Daniel's pulse spiked. "You've been watching me." Ethan's gaze flicked to the barn. "She tried to expose it," he said quietly. "Expose what?" Ethan's eyes were haunted. "She told me she found girls." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Girls? In the basement?" The world tilted. Daniel shook his head. "That's insane. She thought your father was keeping them there before moving them." The air felt too thin. "That's a lie." Ethan stepped closer. "I believed her." The dog growled. "And that's why she trusted you?" Daniel shot back. "Because you believed her?" Ethan's expression twisted. "I tried to help her." "Then where is she?" Silence. Snow drifted between them. Ethan looked at the trapdoor. "She came here the night she disappeared." Daniel's heart stopped. "You were with her?" "Yes." The word landed heavy. "And?" Ethan's voice cracked. "She made me wait in the truck. Said she'd be 10 minutes. Daniel couldn't breathe. "I heard screaming," Ethan whispered. The wind seemed to die. "And I ran." Daniel stared at him. "You ran?" "I was 22, Ethan snapped, anger flaring. "Your father came out with a shotgun. What was I supposed to do?" Daniel felt something inside him fracture. "You left her." Ethan's silence was answer enough. The dog barked once, sharp, urgent. From beneath the barn. A sound. Faint. Metal scraping. Daniel and Ethan locked eyes. And in that frozen moment, they both understood the same thing. Whatever had been buried wasn't finished. The sound came again. Metal against metal. Slow. Deliberate. From beneath the barn. Daniel felt the vibration of it through the soles of his boots. Ethan stepped back instinctively. "That's not possible." But it was. The trapdoor shuddered faintly under the weight of something shifting below. The dog lunged forward and began barking, sharp, commanding, not frantic. Not afraid. Alerting. Daniel dropped to his knees in the snow and grabbed the padlock. His fingers were numb, but adrenaline burned through him. He yanked hard. It didn't budge. Ethan moved beside him. "Step aside." He pulled a tire iron from his truck and wedged it into the lock's hinge. One brutal twist. The metal snapped. The sound echoed across the property. Daniel swallowed. "You ready?" Ethan asked. No, Daniel wasn't ready. But he lifted the trapdoor anyway. A wave of cold air rushed upward, not the dry cold of winter, but damp, subterranean air tinged with rust and something older. There was a ladder. And below that, darkness. Daniel descended first. Each rung creaked beneath his weight. The dog followed close behind him, surprisingly careful on the ladder, claws scraping wood. At the bottom, Daniel clicked on his phone flashlight. The beam cut through the black. Concrete walls. A narrow corridor. And a single hanging bulb at the far end. Still glowing. His stomach dropped. Someone had been down here recently. Ethan climbed down behind him. "I told you," he whispered. "She wasn't crazy." Daniel moved forward slowly. The air smelled faintly of bleach layered over mildew. On the left side of the corridor were 3 doors. Metal. Each with sliding eye slots. Daniel's pulse thundered. "Jesus," Ethan muttered. Daniel approached the first door and pulled the slot open. Empty. A small room. Cot bolted to the floor. No windows. Second door. Empty. But scratch marks scarred the inside of the metal. The dog stiffened at the third. Low growl vibrating deep in its chest. Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to look. But he did. He slid the slot open. Darkness inside. Then, movement. A soft intake of breath. Daniel's heart stopped. "There's someone in there," he whispered. Ethan staggered back. "No, no, that can't." Daniel fumbled with the handle. It was locked. From the outside. He turned to Ethan. "Help me." Together, they forced it open. The hinges screamed. The smell hit them first. Fear. Unwashed air. And in the corner, curled into herself, a girl. Maybe 17. Maybe younger. Her hair hung in tangled strands over hollow cheeks. Her eyes blinked against the light like an animal dragged from a cave. Daniel's voice broke. "It's okay. We're not going to hurt you." The girl didn't respond. The dog moved past Daniel and approached her slowly. Gentle. It lay down a few feet away. The girl's eyes focused on it. And for the first time, recognition flickered. "He kept them rotating," Ethan whispered hoarsely. "Leah said." Daniel silenced him with a look. "How long have you been here?" he asked softly. The girl's lips trembled. 2 weeks, she croaked. 2 weeks. Not 8 years. Not his father. This wasn't past tense evil. This was ongoing. Daniel felt ice flood his veins. "Who did this to you?" he asked. The girl swallowed. "Sheriff." The word detonated in Daniel's chest. Ethan went pale. "No," he breathed. But Daniel already knew. The fear in Tom Calloway's eyes. The warning. "Don't expect me to protect you." The hanging bulb flickered. Footsteps creaked above. Daniel's head snapped upward. Truck doors slamming. More than one. Ethan cursed. "He followed me." The dog rose instantly. Hackles up. The trapdoor groaned open overhead. Boots descended the ladder. Slow. Unhurried. Tom Calloway appeared at the bottom, gun drawn. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired. "I told you to leave," he said quietly. Daniel stepped in front of the girl. "You're sick." Tom's jaw tightened. "You think it started with me?" he asked. "Your father built this." The words hit like a hammer. Daniel felt the room tilt. "My father's dead." Tom gave a humorless smile. "Men like him don't retire. They recruit." Ethan's breath quickened. "You're lying." Tom ignored him. "Your sister found out," he continued, eyes fixed on Daniel. "She went digging where she shouldn't have." "What did you do to her?" Daniel demanded. For a moment, just a flicker, regret crossed Tom's face. "She forced my hand." Daniel lunged. The gun fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Pain exploded through Daniel's shoulder. He crashed into the wall. The dog launched. A blur of fur and teeth. Tom shouted as the animal clamped onto his forearm. The gun discharged again, ricocheting into concrete. Ethan tackled him from the side. They crashed into the corridor wall. The bulb shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. Grunts. A scream. Metal clanging. Daniel forced himself upright despite the fire in his shoulder. He grabbed the fallen gun with his good hand. "Stop!" he shouted. Flashlights flickered above, approaching. Not just Tom. "Back up." Daniel aimed blindly toward the struggle. "Let him go." Tom barked at the dog. Instead, the shepherd bit down harder. Ethan wrestled for control of the weapon on the floor. Another shot rang out. Then silence. Heavy breathing. Daniel's ears rang. When the emergency lights from outside finally illuminated the corridor, Tom Calloway lay motionless, blood pooling dark beneath him. Ethan stood frozen, holding the second gun. The dog sat beside Daniel, sides heaving. Alive. Guarding. Again. Hours later, state police swarmed the property. Sirens painted the snow red and blue. Paramedics stitched Daniel's shoulder. The rescued girl was carried out under blankets. More rooms were discovered behind false walls. More evidence. Years' worth. The quiet town of Black Hollow began to fracture under the weight of what had lived beneath it. Ethan sat in the back of a cruiser, hands trembling, giving his statement. He hadn't known. He'd suspected. He'd been a coward. Daniel didn't know which was worse. 2 days later, Daniel returned to the cemetery. The storm had passed. The sky stretched clear and painfully blue. He stood before Leah's headstone again. The dog stood beside him. State investigators had confirmed what Tom never said aloud. Leah hadn't made it out of that basement. She had tried to free someone, tried to gather proof, and Tom had silenced her. Her body had been moved years ago, recently recovered from a shallow grave near Miller's Bend Bridge. Daniel closed his eyes. "I should have listened," he whispered. The wind stirred softly through the pines. He brushed snow from the inscription again. "She told the truth." "Yes," he said quietly. "You did." He felt the dog press against his leg. Not demanding, not restless. Steady. "You stayed," Daniel murmured to it. "All this time. Waiting. Guarding. Making sure someone came back." Daniel knelt and wrapped his arm around the shepherd's neck. For 8 years, guilt had hollowed him out. But guilt wasn't the same as responsibility. He had failed her, but he had not killed her. That distinction mattered. The town would never be the same. Neither would he. He would stay now. Testify. Help the girls who survived rebuild something like safety. And he would keep the house. Not as a shrine, but as a reminder. Silence protects monsters. Listening saves lives. The dog lifted its head toward the horizon. Daniel followed its gaze. The road out of Black Hollow stretched long and white. He didn't feel the urge to take it. Not anymore. He rested his hand on the cold stone one last time. "Rest now," he whispered. And for the first time since he'd seen her name carved in granite, the cold didn't feel like punishment. It felt like truth.